Hi everyone and welcome to English for You. I'm Pat.
And I'm Ben.
So today we're looking at our fun facts article for this month. And as often when I teach these ones, I like to introduce an extra fun fact. So this article is all about the calendar and the different months. And so the fun fact I will add is that when we think of the days of the week in English, only one of them is named after a god from the Roman myths, and all the others are named after gods and things from the Norse and German myths. Do you know which one that is, Ben?
I do not know, actually. That is a good one.
Okay, well, it is Saturday. Saturday is the only English name for a day of the week that is named after a Roman god, which is Saturn, who was the god of time. All the others, Monday is moon, Sunday is the sun, and then the others are after Norse gods, Tyr, Odin, Thor, and Frigga, or Freya, depending on which name you use for all the other days of the week. So Thursday is Thor's day, Wednesday is Odin's day, that kind of thing. And only Saturn and Saturday is the one that's left over from the Roman times.
Wow, that is a lot of information there.
Yeah, but if you look at the days of the week in other languages, they tend to follow some more of the Roman names. Like Tuesday for French is Mardi, which is Mars's day, which is a Roman god. So it often, some of those names in the different languages depend on different things to do with that country's history.
Yeah.
There you go. That's something maybe we'll do a whole article about another time. But right now we're going to be talking about our calendar years. So let's read through the article and find out more about it.
Reading.
Fun facts. We know that our calendar years start with the birth of Jesus Christ. But the calendar existed for hundreds of years before that. These years are labeled BC, which means before Christ. But how was the calendar invented in the first place? Our calendar originates from ancient Rome, around 750 BC. The first calendar had only 10 months, starting in March. Back then, winter and summer wouldn't always occur at the same points in the calendar. Around 700 BC, King Numa Pompilius of Rome added January and February. He named January after the god Janus. One of many Roman gods, Janus was the god of entrances and beginnings, including the beginning of time. Thus, this was the ideal month to start the new year. But there was a problem. Astronomers back then calculated the wrong number of days for the seasons. The year was now too long. The person who fixed this was Rome's most famous leader, Julius Caesar. In 46 BC, he set the calendar at 365 days.
So the article begins by saying, we know that our calendar years, by which we mean the kind of Western calendar, start with the birth of Jesus Christ. So calendar is a pretty important word for this article, so let's look at what it means. It's got a couple of meanings. In this article, we're using it to mean the system by which the beginning, the length, and the divisions of the year are fixed to kind of divide, okay, this is a year, this year has this many days, this many months, each month has this many days, and so on. More commonly, we also use the word calendar to mean some kind of chart or a series of pages or an app on your phone to show what day, month, or year it is. And often on a calendar, you can write things down on, things like important notes, appointments for that day, and so on. So here, though, we're using calendar to kind of mean the system of counting the days and months. And we could say, as an example, some countries use a lunar calendar based on the moon, as well as the Western calendar.
All right, let's backtrack this a little bit. We hear the phrasal verb start with. Now, this means the beginning to something. Now, oftentimes we use this phrase if there's a lot of things that need to get done. For example, if we are baking a cake, we start with shaping the dough. And after that, we have many more steps to do. Now, in this context, as a calendar has many years and days, the beginning or the first day starts with the birth of Jesus Christ is listed.
Yeah, so that's basically year 0. Okay.
Yeah.
But as we see in the article, the calendar existed for hundreds of years before that. Of course, history didn't start just, 2020 years ago. History goes back a lot further. So there were other calendars before that time.
Oh, yeah. Every kind of people have a different calendars, especially in Asia or the Western world. Yeah. So this takes us back to the article, which says these years are labeled BC, which means before Christ. Yeah. Now, that takes us to label, which means to be named. For example, when we go to the grocery store, we see a lot of food with different labels. Thus, it can also be a noun, but to label something means to give it a title or meaning for what it is. For example, I can label the elephants baseball team as the 兄弟, elements, brothers, or the monkeys baseball team as the Lamigo, monkeys. So here's another example sentence. If you spend time at any prison, you're labeled as a criminal for the rest of your life.
Yeah, people will always say you are a criminal, you've been in jail, that kind of thing. So here we kind of call this calendar BC, before Christ. But they didn't call it that back then, of course, because they didn't know about they didn't know what was coming. So that takes us back to this kind of old calendar, the kind of before Christ calendar. And the article asks the question, but how was the calendar invented in the first place? The word invent is a verb, and it means to create something new by using your imagination or by combining other things to make something new. Things that already existed, you just put them together in a new way to invent something. Here's an example. The telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell.
Wow, an important invention. Now, this takes us back to the phrase in the first place. Now, this phrase means where something started. Now, we often hear it when something is new for the very first time, such as where did baseball start in the first place? Or who invented contact lenses in 新眼镜 in the first place? Now you can see this phrase to go deeper into the meaning of something to gather information so you know the whole story and background of something.
Exactly. We're asking, where did the calendar first start?
Yeah.
We see in the article that says, our calendar, which means the one we're using in the West today, our calendar originates from ancient Rome, around 750 BC. So this particular calendar is 700 years before the birth of Christ. And that's why we use the word originate. Originate means to begin from, and we use it to talk about where something comes from, what its beginnings are, how it came to be, and so on.
Yeah, exactly. And back to the article, the first calendar had only 10 months, starting in March.
So here we're using a reduced sentence structure with a VING verb. So that sentence we just read could be two sentences. The first calendar only had 10 months. The first month started in March. However, by using a VING verb, we can combine these sentences and make them shorter, replacing the first month started with simply starting. Here's another example. We could say, Tony made dinner. He cooked the rice while he fried the meat and vegetables, and change that to Tony made dinner, cooking the rice while he fried the meat and vegetables.
So as we look back to the article, back then winter and summer wouldn't always occur at the same points in the calendar. Romulus, the legendary king of Rome, is credited to be the one who introduced this calendar.
Yeah, we're not sure if Romulus was actually a real person, but he's certainly the story as the guy who started and founded Rome. We then see in the article that around 700 BC, King Numa Pompilius of Rome added January and February. So this was around 100 years later. They realized, we can't keep changing when the summer and winter are. We can't always have them in different months. Let's add 2 more months to kind of make this fit a bit better. And the ones he added were January and February, because before the year started with March.
Yeah, and according to the article, he named January after the god Janus. Now, this brings us to named after, this phrasal verb. Now, this means to put a title on something and give it meaning. For example, many people are named after people from the Bible, such as John or Mark. Or even people are named after their grandparents or parents that have a junior after their name, like Ron Jr.
Yeah, I'm named after one of my parents' university friends. I
Oh.
found out at some point. They had a friend called Patrick at university, and so when I was born, they named me after him because he was a very close friend.
It's interesting.
Okay, so he named January after the god Janus, and one of the many Roman gods, Janus was the god of entrances and beginnings, including the beginning of time. He actually had two faces as well, kind of looking in and out. So the word entrance means the way into a place. And so this could just mean a door, or it could mean the stairs going down into an MRT station. And in that example, we can think of an entrance also being an exit, so you can go in or come out. But in some buildings, they might keep the entrance and the exit separate. So if you think of a department store, here's an example sentence for this. There are entrances to the department store on several different streets.
Yeah, I see that often everywhere, yeah. So according to the article, thus, this was the ideal month to start the new year. And this brings us to the word ideal, this adjective. Now this means the best time, circumstances, environment, or place for something. It is the best conditions that one can have. For example, the ideal time to go sledding is in winter. We can also say the ideal basketball player would be tall and fast and can really jump. Here's another example sentence. Carol is the ideal person for the job. She might have all the qualities that the job needs.
So they've added these 2 months, and that kind of sets the year a bit better. They've named the starting month after the god of beginnings. As the article says, though, but there was a problem.
Let's see about the problem. According to the article, astronomers back then calculated the wrong number of days for the seasons. So this brings us to astronomer, this is a person who studies the stars and planets in the galaxy. Now they look at a number of things such as how far or how old the stars and planets are. Now, they are a type of scientist and make a lot of observations in the solar system, which is where all the stars and planets are, to help understand Earth and all of the planets around us.
Yeah, so they were kind of looking at, okay, when do these groups of stars kind of appear and when do they come in the night sky and how long are the days and things like that. And so they calculated, unfortunately, the wrong number of days. The word calculate is to use math to end up with a number. So you might add numbers, subtract numbers, and kind of work them out and take all the numbers into account to reach an end result. Here's an example. Lucia is good at math. She can calculate the amount of money we need to tip without even looking at the bill.
Wow, that sounds very smart, almost genius-like.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
天才,
I guess it's pretty okay if you're maybe only adding like a 10% bill.
Yeah.
I think most people can calculate how much of a tip to put in there.
Yeah, but 18% or something different.
Yeah, then most people would just go to some kind of get on my phone, look at the computer, figure it out, something like that.
Yeah. Well,
so what did this mean? The fact that they've calculated the wrong number of days, they've kind of made a mistake somewhere in their math, they've maybe forgotten about something. What are the results of this?
Well, according to the article, this means that the year was now too long.
Okay, so I guess that means that, again, it's going to be this sort of weird situation where in one year, winter seems to start now, and in a few years' time, winter's like a different time of year, and it all seems to be like not working right. It's not consistent. Now, this used to happen quite a lot, and people would do things like add an extra month to sort of like make up for it. And I think that this happens in the Chinese calendar, because sometimes a year will have 12 lunar months, and every now and again there'll be a 13th one. Because lunar months are shorter than like Western months. So if you just use 12 lunar months, then you'll end up with like Chinese New Year moving earlier and earlier and earlier until it's like we have 2 Chinese New Years in 1 year. And that's kind of odd. So sometimes you'll find that there's an extra lunar month to sort of keep Chinese New Year around January and February.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. That's what could happen if your year is either too long or too short. The number of days or months aren't quite right. So this is the problem. And so the calendar and the scientists who've worked it out still haven't quite got it right. We see in the article that the person who fixed this was Rome's most famous leader, Julius Caesar. Okay, that's a guy who's worthy of a whole set of articles by himself. He's one of my favorite figures from history. I've read a lot about him, but let's just say he kind of was one of the most important figures when Rome stopped being a republic governed by a group and started becoming an empire run by one man.
He ran the Roman Empire.
He sort of did. He was part of this transition from one to the other. And of course, he's famous for being killed at the end of a play about him by Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Spoiler, he dies in the play. So what did he do to kind of fix the calendar?
Yeah, according to the article, in 46 BC, he set the calendar at 365 days. Yeah, so it's interesting. Now, so Caesar probably adopted his calendar from Egyptian calendar, which was 365 days as well.
Okay, that's an interesting idea. He kind of, Julius Caesar did spend a lot of time in Egypt. If you read about his history, he went over there, he fought some wars, he probably had a baby with the Queen of Egypt at the time, Cleopatra, another famous person from history. So maybe when he was there, he learned a bit about Egyptian culture and astronomy, which is a lot older than Rome's, and figured, hey, 365
we'll
days.
Copy that.
That seems about
Sounds right.
That won't make our year too long or too short.
Yeah, if it's not wrong, don't break it. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, of course, we always think of a year of being 365 days almost all of the time. We've got that leap year that comes in.
Oh, yes, 366 days.
Yeah, we'll kind of talk about that a bit more in tomorrow's article. But at the moment, at least, Julius Caesar kind of fixed the calendar to get it more going in the right direction. And for a long time, it was called the Julian calendar, after his name. He named a lot of things after himself. He ended up July.
July, of course.
Yeah, July was named after him. We'll kind of get back to some of the names of the months in day 2 as well. But right now, we're going to go to today's For You chat question.
For You chat.
So the chat question for today is, in Chinese, the months are simply called by their numbers. Do you think it would be more interesting if the months had interesting Chinese names?
I think that is a good question, actually, because we hear 1月份, 2月份. It's kind of simple. It's really plain. But if we added kind of a new way, every month has a meaning, that's more interesting. We can dig deeper into the culture, especially of Taiwan's significance, and just see just different kind of aspects of the culture built in with the calendar to make it more meaningful as we celebrate every month.
Yeah, I heard that, I'm sure I remember reading that there are sort of very old traditional days for Chinese months. So I think they do have other names. It's just they're not in common use. Everyone would say like, 1月, 2月, and so on. But I think maybe there are other names. They're just not commonly used. And to be fair, the names for in English for the months, some of them are just actually numbers as well. September means 7th month. October means 8th month. And it doesn't make sense because September is the 9th month of the year, but its name means 7th month. And October is the 8th, but it's also the 10th. So in fact, I would say the Western calendar, because of adding these months in, as we saw earlier in the article, and so we've got sort of the first half of the year with different names, but then the September, October, November, December just mean 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. But they're 9, 10, 11, and 12 months.
Yes.
So at least the Chinese numbers are right, which is more than we can say for the Western names for the calendar. So yeah, we do have some different names and there are reasons for them that we'll look at in day 2. But to be honest, I think maybe you could use these traditional names that I've read about for the Chinese months.
That would be more interesting, I believe.
I like your idea of kind of coming up with a few new ones that would allow to celebrate the culture, though. Yeah. France did that a couple of 100 years ago. They tried to create an entirely new calendar and they tried to give all these months and every day a new sort of name and a new flower or a plant.
It's a little too much right there. Yeah,
it took them
really
years.
Troublesome. Yeah,
they also kind of went crazy and turned time into like decimals. So they had like
it's too specific.
A day was 10 hours and every hour had 100 minutes and stuff like that.
Yes.
They gave up on that idea after a short number of years. They said, this is crazy, this doesn't work.
Yeah,
but I think there are still some like clocks that show those like digital or like decimal time still around, and there are a few old calendars in France that will still sort of have those old words for the months that they created back then. So just making a new calendar isn't as easy as it sounds.
No,
it's
a lot of work
big
involved.
Mess. You've got to figure out everything right. It's not just like, let's change the names. That'll be easy.
Yeah, make sure the time links with everything. Look at the stars, the galaxy, the planets. Know that you're on the right time, that your calendar is right. It tells the right time. Yes.
Exactly. So, it's usually the work, as we've seen in today's article, it's the kind of work that takes like hundreds of years to get it right.
That astronomers can use.
Yeah, a lot of kind of false starts and mistakes and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll find out how the calendar changed a bit more in day 2, but for now, that's all the time we have. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Fun facts. We know that our calendar years start with the birth of Jesus Christ. But the calendar existed for hundreds of years before that. These years are labeled BC, which means before Christ. But how was the calendar invented in the first place? Our calendar originates from ancient Rome, around 750 BC. The first calendar had only 10 months, starting in March. Back then, winter and summer wouldn't always occur at the same points in the calendar. Around 700 BC, King Numa Pompilius of Rome added January and February. He named January after the god Janus. One of many Roman gods, Janus was the god of entrances and beginnings, including the beginning of time. Thus, this was the ideal month to start the new year. But there was a problem. Astronomers back then calculated the wrong number of days for the seasons. The year was now too long. The person who fixed this was Rome's most famous leader, Julius Caesar. In 46 BC, he set the calendar at 365 days.
Vocabulary Review.
Calendar. Jane looked at the calendar to see what day her birthday would be on next year. Label. You can put your old clothes in the box labeled Giveaway. Invent. Movies did not exist until the movie camera was invented by the Lumiere brothers in 1895. Entrance. The building's main entrance was locked, but we were able to get in through the back door. Ideal. We found an ideal place to set up our tent near the lake and far from the parking lot. Calculate. Linda calculated the amount of money it would take to go on vacation, and she started saving.
智慧小补帖
Originate. Astronomer.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net